Hola, persona que me estás viendo desde la Siberia, persona que me estás viendo desde Siracusa, persona que me estás viendo desde Sinaloa. Mi nombre es Nachito y vamos a seguir aprendiendo sobre todas esas competencias que se tienen que dar para poder hacer un jueguito. Diseño, desarrollo, arte, dirección de arte, música, de diseño de sonido, todas esas cosas. Vamos a seguir por el mundo 4. Primero, a leer estos textos. Por cierto, no sé si lo estás notando, pero tenemos nuevos auriculares y rezo a la Virgen que vayan mejorando los niveles de audio en esta serie. Tendrían que, porque ahora estoy tomando todo por separado. Empecemos. Momento y lugar, mundo número 4. En una visita a la casa de sus padres para un almuerzo festivo, Tim se sintió regresar a esos días lejanos, cuando vivía bajo su techo, oprimido por su insistencia por mantener unos valores extraños que para él eran absurdos. En aquel entonces, las riñas hacían saltar gotas de salsa al mantel. Para escapar, Tim salió a tomar el aire camino de la universidad a la que asistió luego de marcharse de la casa familiar. A medida que se alejaba de esa casa angustiosa, sentía cómo la ofuscación de la infancia se desvanecía en el pasado, pero ahora se sumergió en todas las inseguridades que sintió en la universidad, en el pánico de caminar por la cuerda floja social. Tim solo se sintió aliviado cuando la visita concluyó. Sentado en su casa, en el presente, reflexionó sobre el contraste. Comprobó que mejoró mucho desde aquellos días. Esta mejora, día a día, lo acerca aún más a encontrar a la princesa. Si ella existe, debe existir, lo transformará a él y a todos. En su viaje sintió que todos los lugares despiertan una emoción y cada emoción invoca un recuerdo, un momento y un lugar. ¿No podría encontrar a la princesa ahora, esta noche, solo, yendo de un sitio a otro y advirtiendo cómo se siente? Un rastro de sentimiento, de asombro e inspiración lo llevaría a ese castillo. En el futuro ella lo rodea con sus brazos, su aroma le llena de emoción y crea un momento tan impactante que puede recordarlo en el pasado. La mañana siguiente, en cuanto Tim salió por la puerta hacia lo que el día nuevo le reservara, sintió algo parecido al optimismo.
So it wasn't like the first time you read Calvino, you were just thinking it would be cool to make a game like this sometime.
No, not at all.
It was actually much closer to the actual time of making Braid that you first started thinking like, hey,
yeah,
it would be neat to do something like that, those books that I read.
Yeah, and specifically what I was thinking was, well, you know, in a story, you can just sort of postulate whatever the laws of physics are. Like, okay, the moon comes really close and it pulls the ground up and stuff, right? Doesn't exactly work that way in a game, especially like the more systemic the game is, the more you kind of can't just cheat that sort of thing. You have to more make a system that exhibits those properties.
Right.
And that to me is more magical. Right. I was like, there's something cool, and if it's hard, it seems very hard, but if you can do it, it's a little bit more groundbreaking than just doing a story about the thing, right?
Yeah.
In the field of games, it's a thing that very few people had done. Now, there were other games that did analogies of this sort, right?
Okay.
So one of the earliest ones was Rod Humble's game, The Marriage, which I had shown at EGW, which, like, there's two people in this relationship and they're just colored squares on the screen, and you move them around and some stuff happens, and, you know, and then Jason Rohrer actually had done these two games, Passage and Gravitation. I think they also engage in this kind of analogy where there's a system of rules, and those rules are expressive about the situation that the game's about, right? It's not just the plot and the fiction that the game is about, but the rules of the universe that are being set up are expressive of what the game is about. And so I wanted to do something like that. And I wanted to do it about physics because, you know, quantum mechanics, for example, is pretty weird, as is relativity, right? And I thought it would be fun to take that weirdness and instead of conflating it with human scale things in a fiction kind of way, like those stories do. Let's conflate it with human level things by just making the phenomena happen on a human scale.
Right.
And then just like seeing what happens and seeing how to make a game out of that. And that'll be fun and interesting. Like, if there's quantum superposition or something and something's at multiple places until the waveform gets localized, that's one idea, right? Mm-hmm. Or one thing that comes up in physics a lot is time being bidirectional, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is even true back in Newtonian physics, but also in relativity and stuff. And so what does that mean? How do you make a game where time is bidirectional? It's challenging because it seems like almost you can't make anything happen.
Right.
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 Because it would have to be a completely pre-recorded sequence for you to go forward and backward. And so what does that mean? And so those questions were just in the air.
I see. And they're kicking around in your head, growing over time, somewhere in the 2003, 2004 kind of.
Yeah, it may not have even been that. It may have been just the few months before.
So like 2004-ish times. Then,
But you can see like how these are they're both difficult questions to answer.
Yes.
And also not very actionable until you have a good answer.
Right. Yeah, you're not really going to be able to do much until you get something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Un ejemplo de historia bidireccional es Tenet, una de las últimas películas de Christopher Nolan, y ahí te das cuenta cómo si lo querés llevar demasiado lejos, no está bueno. Y me parece fantástico que se haya decidido por un enfoque más poético en este caso. Es decir, no hay una correlación uno a uno entre la historia y las mecánicas, sino que la historia sirve para ilustrar, para enmarcar lo que está sucediendo en el juego, pero no es que vos tenés que estar en tu cabeza llevando el rastro de la línea de tiempo de la vida de Tim o las cosas que le sucedieron. No importan tanto.
But so also with the story stuff, it's like you read some words about time or something, what's going on with this character or that character, before you experience the gameplay, right? And so you don't really even know what to connect to. But after you finish the world, if you were interested enough to go back and read it some more, you then have both halves of the thing and you could maybe see correspondences, right?
Right.
And then similarly, there's structural parallelism between the worlds and stuff, and just things about them that you could notice. Like, on the one hand, I expect a great many people would just walk past the story things and not care about them very much.
Not even read them, potentially.
And that's why it's designed the way it is, as opposed to the original thing. Because in the original thing, where it puts it on the screen and it's like, the point of this screen is only for you to read this text and then press spacebar to continue, you almost have to disrespect the game a little bit to not read the text. You know what I mean? Like if I'm playing a modern game and like I'm mashing the button through all the dialogue scenes that I don't care about, I'm kind of disrespecting the game.
Yes.
But I have to in order to get to the part that I want to play, right?
Yes.
So here, it's a little bit of a middle ground there where, you do have to walk across the room and you incidentally walk past these pages, but like the function of the room is also just to be the playable menu that contains
the linking
doors.
room, yeah.
And so it's not only the text, and so you kind of don't have to totally disrespect the game. If I were to redesign Braid now, which I'm not going to do for this Anniversary Edition, but like I might even make it, like right now, it's still a little bit passive aggressive, or that's not the right word. It's a little bit closer to the original thing in that the story text is always between you and the doors. And I might mix that up a little bit. Right. There's an analog dial of how strongly am I suggesting that maybe you want to read the text, right? And it's in the middle somewhere.
I mean, you could imagine a design that went very far in that direction where it's like the house itself contains all of the linking and the text somehow, so that you literally never go to a screen that is just about having text there as the main thing that's in it, right?
Yeah. There's just some other things too, like the ratio of, okay, so you go onto the cloud screen, right? And the title of that world is big letters at the top and always visible. Like you don't have to even go to a podium. So aside from the doors, the function of the cloud screen, just the fact that it's the cloud screen again, the first time, of course, you don't know what it is, but the second time and thereafter, it established a pattern.
Yeah.
So you get that. You get the title, which is a hint about what's coming and sort of tells you what this world is called. And that's there before you even go to a podium, right? And so when you go to the podium and the story text comes up, it's like, okay, maybe you're interested and maybe you're not, but those other things already provided some value or interest as well, right? And so it's just this balancing act. I might make it a little bit differently today even, but it's okay. You know, I feel good about that. It's the first puzzle game that I ever designed.
Yeah.
First single player game I ever designed. So, you know.
Pero está fabuloso. Existe tal cosa como sobre diseñar, lo mismo que sobre ingenierizar. Ya está fantástico. Cumple todas las funciones y las cumple perfecto. Ya está, amigo. Si querés un ejemplo de pantalla de texto largo que vos tenés que pagar con tracción a sangre, es decir, tenés que caminar por todas las pantallas en vez de simplemente apretar siguiente, buscá The Neverhood, juego de los 90 hecho totalmente en plastilina y animado a mano, cuadro por cuadro, donde cuando te tienen que dar el lore del mundo, cuando te quieren explicar la génesis del mundo y todo lo que sucedió hasta que vos empezás a jugar, hay una pantalla que debe durar, no sé, al menos 30 o 40 pantallas que vos vas de izquierda a derecha caminando súper lento y en toda la pared hay columnas y columnas de texto que estoy seguro que están buenísimas. Los fragmentos que yo leí estaban buenísimos, pero son como el génesis de la Biblia. Tenés que estar muy interesado en el mundo para poder leerte todo eso. Y encima los forros hacen que no sea opcional. Esto es, tenés que caminar todas esas pantallas para llegar a un cassette, que son como los coleccionables de ese juego. Y después volver a caminar todas las 40 pantallas de vuelta, solo para encontrar ese cassette y, por supuesto, leer si es que te interesa. Pero eso te lo cuento para que lo busques como un ejemplo extremo de hacer al usuario caminar por mucha pantalla de texto. Vamos allá. El foso. Y acá nos introducen esta mecánica. El tiempo está mapeado a la posición X del jugador. Y la solución en este caso es caminar hasta acá. La llave es inmune al paso del tiempo, por lo tanto vuelve con el enemigo. Y podemos abrir la puerta. Vamos a ver qué nos cuentan estos muchachos.
The pit stage first was introduced in World 3, so we're kind of iterating on that. But in this case, we're also going from the old world to the new world. Yeah, there's a marked change in environment and texture and everything. The plants are going away. We have rock and like more inert things, lifeless. There's a greater sense of coldness and distance. The background is further away. It's all blue. It's cloudy and austere.
The pit. Oh yeah, so here's another thing where he has to go in the cubby. But then we're like, oh my gosh, space equals time now, and I need to get to where he is, and if I just jump down, I'm in the wrong place. And anyway, all right. So, and we also have this strong sound cue with the sound grinding back and forth, which drove my wife crazy, and I had to put on my headphones.
probably the best moment in this level is when you first enter the level and you get to experience the way, because it's very different from the rest of the game that you've played so far. Right?
But there's also something that one may or may not notice on this level, which is if you bonk a monster while moving left, gee, he doesn't die. But that's because you're moving left and driving time backwards. He only dies if you bonk him and then move to the right. And that's kind of interesting. When we were talking before about the platform, that it's like it's there in the present or in the past, but I can still interact with it now and what's going on. Here, there's a similar thing like, gee, is moving to the left the same as rewind? And it isn't, because you can still rewind your own world line, which might include both left and right motions. So that's a little interesting. And now there's kind of two notions of what it means to go backwards in time.
And that was interesting to try and design and program, because I had that same question. I was like, wait, yeah, they are different, and that's interesting. Should I make them the same, though? And I didn't quite see how to do it and have it be good, because like either when you push left, it's the same as the rewind button, right? And then
But
you're
then
not
how do you
actually going
rewind?
left. Yeah. And what's the point of that, right? Or it's a different thing, right? Yeah.
Right.
And so, yeah. So now there's sort of this idea that like rewinding the whole time has been rewinding your personal time in a way, except you never had a difference between that and anything else before this.
Right. So now you can rewind your personal time and through your motion control which way time flows in the rest of the world.
Yes, it's a very egotistical world where everything responds to you. World 4 is time is tied to space. In fact, I think it was t equals x and then t equals y, which there's no t equals y in the final game.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
But how did you have that idea? Or
It was this physics initial idea. And so once I realized, okay, there's rewind in this game, it's working well. How do I tie in the other physics ideas? Because there's maybe supposed to be quantum mechanics and relativity and whatever. And
right.
well, what is there about relativity? Like there's 4 dimensions, right? And like time is a dimension. Can I put that in this game somehow? And does that involve rewind in some way?
I see.
And, you know, regular space-time for us is like 3 + 1 before you start talking about string theory or whatever.
Right.
This game is 2 dimensions. So like, how do I map? Is it 2 + 1? And just somehow it just maps onto the idea of like, what if I just controlled time by your position, right?
Right.
It's just the idea popped up. You know, what can I say? Like those were the inputs. And in this concrete case, it was not very hard to have the idea, let's just map it to space because that'll be cool. It's again, I start thinking about what that is before I implement it. And it's like, oh, it'll be kind of neat that you're kind of in control of the motion of the world. And if you stop, everything stops. Like before I try to make puzzles with that, it's got an interesting feel and an interesting kind of interactivity, right? And then I think, how would I implement it? And it's like, well, it's pretty easy to look at like, where is the player spawn? In the very initial implementation, maybe even in the final thing, your spawn point is just like the leftmost part of the level. Mm-hmm. So there's no question about, could I go earlier in time than when I spawned in?
Right.
So you just literally load the level and then you simulate it forward. And then instead of just the rewind key, you have an alternate input that's if you walk left, rewind the rewind buffer by that amount, right? And that's very easy to think of implementation wise. And you could kind of hack it in and like, well, if there's some robustness issues with this or whatever, we'll think about it later, right?
But it can't quite rewind the rewind buffer, can it? Because isn't the way that works in Braid that you can also rewind?
Yes.
So it can't quite rewind the rewind buffer in the way that the rewind buffer normally gets rewound because it needs to be putting that action also onto the rewind buffer.
So it's a little bit different. It's like,
you might look at the rewind buffer and apply it or something?
Yes,
okay.
It's seek to the time indicated by the leftward travel.
Right.
Round to the nearest frame.
Yep.
Right. Take that state and then forward diff the current state to that.
Right.
Right. And and that's the new rewind frame. So it is not trivial, but if your code is not a flaming nightmare, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not worried. I'm sure the rewind buffer was just a flat array at that time or whatever. Of each frame is a thing, and then there's probably a data structure for each frame. It wasn't that sophisticated, but I don't care, right? There's not that many objects in this game. It's a proof of concept. It's all good. Yeah.
Correcto. Otra manera de hacerlo hubiera sido que el botón de rebobinar, o sea, esto que estoy haciendo ahora, solo rebobine a Team y todo lo demás esté mapeado a Team. En fin, temas de implementación. No es el fuerte de este canal, sino el diseño. Bien. Ya hay inmediatamente muchas cosas pasando. No me deja de asombrar la calidad gráfica comparada con el anterior. Es terriblemente superior. Bien. Primer audio.
This is Jumpman, and of course, homage. And we get over here, and of course, we're doing the thing that we were trained to do when we played Donkey Kong before most of our listeners were born. And then you get here, and you're like, wait, hold on, he's at the top of the ladder. What am I going to do? So the first few things I tried here was, well, I could rewind, but oh, no, it's still the same situation. I'm just undoing and redoing the same situation. And, again, it's this kind of nice joke or misdirection that, well, that's not how you're going to get up onto that platform, even though you played Donkey Kong as a child. And look, you can ride that guy up.
I mean, how long did it take you to think of that?
Not sure. I mean,
maybe not that long.
Not too long. I mean, again, it's sort of like most things are there for a reason. He's there. We can make him go backwards. Backwards is up. We can jump on top of him. There's that platform there. But still, it was very satisfying.
There's a certain kind of puzzle mindset, which is, I have faith that everything in this puzzle is not random. That guy's over there. What's he for? Right? Because the game could disappoint you by adding lots of random guys, and then you stop thinking that, right?
But there's also some faith that I think the designer of this game enjoys things that are deliberately not quite what I expect at first.
Yes. And so, what you mentioned about the climbing up the ladders, that was very deliberate. And it's a little bit of a joke. Again, not a super funny joke, but it's like mildly like, I see what you did there, right? But also, it is a little bit of misdirection, because until you get about here, once you get about 2 person widths from this ladder, you see the problem, right? Prior to that, you don't necessarily. But in addition to being that kind of like, let's lead you down a path and then prevent you from that, it is also establishing a pattern to make the way that you get up more interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you could erase all this Donkey Kong stuff and just have the level be, there's this guy on the left, and you have to like climb up a ladder, and most of this geometry would be gone. And if this were like a minimalist puzzle game, that would be the level, maybe, right? And then it would be just kind of a tweaky, weird action thing.
Right.
But in the context of this other, and I'm going to use the word like fiction here, or story of what you're trying to do, which I don't usually like using that language, but there is this, you have this personal narrative of like, I'm trying to go up the Donkey Kongs, right? And it's working great. I'm just doing some light platforming of dodging the guys. And then you get here, and then you have a problem. And then the guy on the side is like, it amplifies how interesting the thing is that you're doing, right? As opposed to just, I used the guy to get up on a ledge I wouldn't normally be able to get up on. That's kind of boring.
Well, and of course, this is a very humorous level, so we're getting a sense of the author's sense of humor here. It's a cuter version of misdirection than what we're talking about with the 2 keys and the 3 gates. But there's another nice thing which is going on here, because just a moment ago in the previous level, we were like, oh, wow, now you have all this control. You can reverse your own world line, your own personal time, and you can control the direction of the world. My gosh, what can't you do, right? You could control everything. But you realize here that this mechanic where space equals time also creates new constraints. It's not just more control than before. And one of those constraints is if he's at the top of the ladder and you're at the bottom of the ladder, and there's kind of axiomatically, you have to look for a different path. And recognizing that is, of course, very important in the very next puzzle.
Otra forma de decirlo es como veníamos diciendo hace un par de capítulos atrás, el level design, como cualquier forma de arte, es una conversación entre el creador y el usuario. Entonces eso que estaba diciendo recién es, hay una conversación donde yo te genero la expectativa de que estás simplemente haciendo un poco de platforming simple, pero llega un punto que, mira, no te dejo seguir. Entonces vas a tener que buscar otra vuelta. Y me gusta mucho esa forma, ese marco conceptual, ¿no? Pensarlo como una conversación. Sobre todo si estás pensando en términos de diseño. Porque te da ciertos parámetros de qué cosas no hacer. Por ejemplo, existe tal cosa como en una conversación hacer infodumping, sepultar a la persona con demasiada información, lo cual hace que esa persona se bloquee, deje de responder, se apabulle. No queremos eso. Entonces no te voy a dar más de lo que puedes manejar, y tener ese tacto es en esencia lo que hace un buen level designer. Manejar siempre el desafío próximo a la competencia esperada del jugador, ¿no? Yo espero que para cuando hayas llegado a este punto ya entiendas esta mecánica, porque de eso depende que vos puedas seguir o no. Y hablando de seguir o no, me voy a tener que ir y volver a entrar para poder conseguir la pieza que dejé inaccesible al querer entrar por la puerta de la derecha. Sigamos al nodo del arte.
I feel this is a good world to observe the live brushstrokes, because as you run back and forth, you can see the painting being done and undone. Those are on the foreground rocks, and in the sky, there's those diagonal strokes in the sky back there. And we also have like the curly clouds that are generating and changing. And of course, we have falling snowflakes.
So the curly clouds are they? I guess there's some in the old one, but you're a lot more focused on the curly clouds in the new one.
Yeah, the curly clouds were a staple of the original version, and now they're brought to life. More animation, more subdivision, and everything.
Oh, and there's this really cute thing of, oh, gee, there are two ways I could get to that puzzle piece. I could approach it from the left or from the right.
Yeah,
and then you try to approach from the right, and you're like, what happened? My key, it just broke. Why isn't the door open? And then you realize, oh, it's not open because I just attempted to open this gate while moving backwards in time. And the mechanics of gates doesn't like that. And so then you have to go back and do some of it. You have to get back up there again. And
well, you have to leave the level because the key's destroyed and you can't rewind it. It'll never come back.
Which is slightly, I admit that's slightly frustrating that you have to go back to the clouds and do some stuff over again. But, it's a lesson well learned.
Well, so it is a little bit mean. This is like a mean moment in the game. Because in the same way that earlier in the game, like with the gate example you mentioned, it's set up so that we're really encouraging you to do it wrong. Here, we're also really encouraging you to do it wrong, right? And
right, it's true that one also, if you use
like
the wrong key, you're kind of screwed and you have to restart the level. I did find that a little frustrating, I admit.
Well, yeah, but it's intentionally...
Sometimes you have to bring the pain.
Yeah, it's intentionally a little bit... Like here it's so much apparently more straightforward. The key is right there. Yeah. The gate is right there.
Exactly.
Now, you should have been wary from the fact that there's two gates to the same thing so simply. And honestly, you should have known that walking left doesn't do certain things by now, right? Because that's what you've been doing for 10, 15, 20 minutes at this point. But most people do it anyway. They just sleepwalk into it. And that the way that I thought about it was, it's a little bit like a smack to wake you up if you're sleepwalking through the game. And like what you do matters actually. You know, it's a mild negative experience in the middle of a bigger game that's hopefully a positive experience.
It's also the fact that the key is sparkly and immune to rewind means two things. One, as we'll encounter a couple levels later, is it means you can carry it to the left. And the other is that you can't get it back after you broke it.
Yeah, and there's no way to get in the rules of the game. Like what you would like is to be able to carry it to the left and then get it back after you mess up. And that's just simply not possible according to the rules of this universe. So it's not my fault that it's mean, you see. It's like, that's just, the universe is a little bit mean. I just put the gate there. That's all.
Vale. Así que ya sabes, no es que John sea malo. Él solo está siguiendo órdenes.
So now, right away, we're faced with exactly the same situation. He's at the top of the ladder whenever we want to get up there. What are we going to do? Oh, it's got to be something involving those gates. But even once we move the gates, it's still a little confusing because now we can't get around him.
I would say this is one of the harder puzzles in the game. It's also one of the earlier ones that I designed. It got modified a few times. I would say it's a little bit still rough to play. It's hard to play. Because it's hard to think of a solution, and then it's a little hard to execute the solution.
It is a little hard to execute it because you have to jump off the guy's head.
You have to jump off,
and then move to the right in the right way. And
you have to go left to get past the switch, right? That's what you do to reset it, and then you have to go right. And it's just it's hard to do both of those things.
And it took me a while, even though there's an audible cue. It took me a while to realize that the switch was being reset as I was moving through the air above it, because my X coordinate moved to its left.
Yeah, although you can pre-think that out if you're thinking clearly about the puzzle. But it's hard to execute the left jump and then come back
turn around,
and air control and turn around. It's very hard.
I think also for me, there was a psychological thing that held me back on this level. Somehow I understood that moving left or right ran time forward and backwards, but I always thought of that as standing on a platform and walking or running to the left or right. Yeah. And even though it's the same mechanic, I think I had a little bit of trouble conceiving that same mechanic was running even when I was in midair.
Because it's in the air, yeah.
Which, of course, then you learn it, and that's cool.
But maybe this is too steep of a learning curve. Depending on your target audience. If you're trying to make a puzzle game for the biggest audience possible, that's probably true, right? For that aesthetic. And so you would probably have like a starter puzzle where you have to flip the switch back by running on a platform, like you said. And then this would be a smaller increment from that. It would be like, wait, I can't, if I run on the platform, I'm below it, and that's not where I want to be, right? And so you could imagine a bigger level that has that sequence. Now, one of the constraints I painted myself into on Braid, which is good in some ways because it kept the game focused, is that there's 12 puzzle pieces per world, right? And so if I started getting lots of ideas for things to do, I kind of had to pick and choose. And so I wasn't really in the mode of extending things, or like ramping things in like that.
Right.
Although in The Witness, I do that a lot, right? And so maybe that's an aesthetic that I learned more how to do in The Witness and didn't have as much in mind here. Although I do it a lot, actually, like phase and the locked gates and stuff in Irreversible.
But you don't do really long sequences here.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice in the end that the total number of puzzles is not that large, but each one has a nice element to it.
Yeah. But, if I were redesigning the game, which we're deliberately not doing, but if I were, I'd be pretty tempted to change it, like we were just saying, to have more of a lead-in. Because again, what's difficulty isn't that interesting. Like if things are too easy, they're boring, right? But if they're too hard, it's like, So something should be not more difficult than the point behind it is interesting, right? You need to see enough interest to validate the effort and the pain and whatever. And hopefully that's true through most of this game for most people. But, sometimes it's not.
It needs to feel worth it. And of course, people have different thresholds on that. So we have to do this left and right jumping a bit here as well, right? Because we need him to survive.
Well, you can sort of go up here, I guess, but you can do it this way and avoid the jump.
Oh,
which is weird because
didn't figure that out.
Well, you could also doing a left jump is tricky because you have to go far enough left to get him alive again. And then air control to the right.
Exactly. So the way I solved this was I jumped on him, I bonked him going to the right, I resurrected him by going to the left midair, and then I had to go to the right in order to get on the platform, and it was pretty delicate. So, but I mean, that ladder is right there, that planter or whatever it is at the top is right there. So maybe this is a good example of a place in the game where there is a twitchy solution and a more relaxed and insightful solution.
Again, it was a long time ago, but I think I was trying to tune this to make that solution impossible. And it's still...
I got it after 17 or 18 tries.
Yeah.
It wasn't that many, but
so you'll note that I made it less obvious because the platform is really high up so that you can't see the monster necessarily, right?
True.
Until you jump way down there, right? And that makes it, it makes it so you have to be a little deliberate.
Right.
And that was one of the things. So again, when I made the level, I was sort of thinking, how many times can we have the player loop through that empty space in different ways to do what they want to do? And it's sort of like 3, right? Or 5, I don't know, depending on what you count. Because you've got to stomp on the monster. You've got to get him alive again. Then you've probably got to knock the key down there, and then you've got to go down and back up and get the key and then up, right? So it's kind of cool to do these figure eights.
That planter makes me think of Edward Gorey somehow.
Which one?
That, the urn or vase or whatever it is at the top of that platform.
Oh, yeah. It's sort of one of the column tops that we use.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it could be a vase. This is, back in the day, we had to ration our efforts, and so we reused graphical assets where it made sense. And so what this really was is, it's like a nub that marks the end of the platform. It's a little bit suspicious because obviously there could be a flat platform here,
right?
But it's like, go to the right and go. You want to go to the right and go through the gate, right?
Yeah.
And so jumping over this to the left is not necessarily something that people are going to think of. And then even if they do this, if you fall to the left, you get back where you started, and it's not necessarily better, right?
I see. Yeah.
So you have to really jump to the left,
and then go all the way across.
Across.
Okay.
Pequeños guiños para empujar al jugador en la dirección correcta. Otro de estos. Afortunadamente con menos comentarios que la vez pasada. Creo que estuvimos media hora en esta pantalla la vez pasada solo para escuchar todas las consideraciones de diseño.
Hunt in this world. This is one of my favorite puzzles in the game. Because again, you think you know what to do, you've seen this a couple times, whatever, and you bonk them, but then you start noticing that, well, of course, they get unbonked when you're heading to the left, or they don't get bonked at all. And so you're like, oh, okay, I have to bonk them when I go to the right, but wait, I have to get back down there and bonk that other guy moving to the right, but now I have to get back over there, and I just unbonked that guy, and how am I ever going to do this? I think this is one of the strongest combinatorial puzzles in the game, in the sense that you really have to see, I can bonk them all, but I need to do that in order in their X coordinate from left to right. Once you work that out, and you have to go to the left, but not too far left because you don't want to unbonk that guy that you just bonked. And then there's a nice little lagniappe, I think, or, there's a nice little joke at the end where you think that this scheme is going to fail miserably. Because you think, oh, well, okay, I planned this out so beautifully, but wait, that last guy is to the right of the ladder, but then lo and behold, the gate itself is sparkly, and it's open now, and it's okay that he's alive at the end. And as a little extra thing, I was just feeling neighborly toward the trolls at this point, so I resurrected all of them before leaving the level.
Okay,
I just felt that was the polite. That was the polite thing to do, you know?
Yeah, they're your buddies, right?
Yeah,
they helped you get where you are today. You should acknowledge them.
And it's true, they look a little grumpy, but who doesn't, you know? And so I just wanted to leave this level with them all alive.
I get you.
A bit about time traveling in sound, because as mentioned earlier, the original Braid did not have any ambient sounds except in the 3 rain levels in World 3. But since we decided to add that extra dimension to all the levels in the remastered Braid, we started to face challenges here in World 4. Because in this world, when you move from left to right, you move in time, and thereby you also move back and forth in sound, since sound only exists in time. It means that at any given point on the horizontal axis of the game level, you will hear the exact same part of the ambience and the music, which means that we can be very precise about what you hear where in the level. In this specific level, where the camera is locked, it only takes about 6 seconds to walk from left to right in the screen, and that means it is only a 6-second long ambience you move back and forth in. So here we designed a single 6-second audio file that consists of a left-panned winter wind in the beginning and gradually became a right-panned warm water babble at the end, and thereby matched the environment that Tim is walking through at any given moment. So he's actually walking back and forth in the sound file. And in many ways, this gave us a whole new perspective on sound design. It's like actually moving back and forth in a snapshot of time. And what then when Tim, and thereby time, doesn't move, and theoretically no sound can exist? Again, sound only exists in time. Here we tried to make our interpretation of a snapshot sound, or what we called a frozen sound of the ambience in the given level. A small curiosity is that when Tim walks up or down the little hill in the lower right of the screen, you hear a small glitch in the music. This is actually not a bug, but a feature, resulting from Tim slowing time a bit down while he also climbs the vertical axis. The same effect as if someone slowed down the turning record for a short moment. We actually wanted to fix this little music glitch that the level design presented, but since the glitch was also there in the original Braid, the new and old music tracks would come a tiny bit out of sync, which was against our principle of sample accuracy between the two versions, so we decided to keep it.
A ver, vamos a escucharlo. Correcto. Arranca más tranquilo en la izquierda, termina en la derecha. Continuemos.
Movement by degrees. So, you know, the first part is kind of tricky, but it's sort of clear what to do. Now we're really having to deal with a mixture of rewindable and non-rewindable things, except now the non-rewindable things mean things that trundle forward in time, whether we move left or right or not. And so we have to deal with that, and it's fun. By the way, I like the art on this world too. The sort of, you know, you see all these childhood things in the background. And of course, it's very nice that the snow falls up whenever we're moving to the left.
Took some doing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Why not just run the code backwards? I don't understand.
Anywho.
So then the hard part, of course, here is dealing with the 3 cacti later on. For me, it took several tries because I was like, oh, wait, okay, I see what I have to do. There's a couple places in the game where I felt like, okay, I need to build up a time bank, right? I need to sit somewhere for a while until I have enough to rewind, because you can't rewind into things that haven't happened yet. Yeah. And so I did that, and then I realized I needed to do the fast rewind to move to the left quickly enough, or at least that's what I thought. And it took me a couple tries. And then, of course, after doing that, I worked a lot harder to get 2 monsters onto the platform so I could get up a little bit higher to the ultra super secret places, and that was fun.
Right on.
Yeah, of course, it's also, as you say, when you're to the right down there, the third cactus is like just sitting there up. And I remember feeling like, well, when does it go down? The question is where?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're in this world.
And that's just a kind of neat, like, by this point in the game, you've done that enough that that's not new, but it's still a little bit, it's a slightly different permutation of that than you've had to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bien, pero vamos a escuchar los nodos de la derecha. Pero
This is a piece of art that I actually used to prototype a lot of different palettes. I would adjust the hue of the foreground and background and adjust the brightness and try a lot of things out. But I can see here elements, again, of that puzzle area from World 3 that showed up in the previous concept art that had the horse and the bird. And these colors now are looking a lot like World 4 with the orange foreground and the distant blue hills in the background. Here I am exploring different color combinations. Again, the need to have a clear differentiation between foreground and background is always guiding us. I like to try things that are unconventional or seem weird or might not work or someone told me wouldn't work. So I might put blue in the foreground and orange in the background, even though the orange is going to come forward naturally, being a warmer color. Eventually, that's what we do in World 4. It's got the orange foreground, distant blue background. I remember working on this, and I think I was like at a Panera Bread, and I might have taken my iMac and my Wacom tablet with me and plugged it in a booth. I think I did that one time. I was driving around my mom's minivan, so it wasn't, parking lot. You just lug the box in. That was life in those days, okay? Yeah, I actually really like this one, and it doesn't resemble anything in the game too much. I noticed the top right, some of those rocks that include like beige and browns and some grays and little hints of red. Looks familiar, like I think I took that out of one of the other earlier pieces of concept art for World 3. But I just really like the kind of subtlety of this one, and I think I'm often working with really vivid colors.
Está hermosa esa
but I
paleta.
really like the beiges, grays, greens, golds that are all pretty subtle with those hits of red. It looks like we've settled on a general direction for World 4, the orange foreground rocks and the distant pale blue background. And I'm just trying to figure out what those rocks are going to look like and trying out different rhythms and different styles. And I know I pulled a lot of concept art of rocks. What are rocks like? There's so many kinds. There are some really tight spaces in Braid where a key can go and a monster can go, but Tim cannot go. So we had to come up with some convention or some visual indicator that don't expect that you can go here, but we have to still show that it's a space that could be entered by something. I even have a version where there's sort of a sign that just shows the monster, indicating, I guess, monster only may enter. I'm trying different things out here. In some cases, we kind of went towards patterns or architectural elements that look like they block you, but not entirely. They look like they would prevent entry, but they're permeable to some extent.
Otra ventaja de que el lore sea poético, de alguna manera, es que podés tener todas esas partes de nivel que no tienen una explicación, no podrían tener jamás una explicación. Porque hay un recoveco pequeño que solo pueden acceder enemigos y que es pequeño y después, digamos, que es pequeño y que no lleva a ningún lado. No es ni una madriguera, ni un refugio. Es solo un lugar donde poner una llave. Y me parece que en un juego que tiene como tan protagonista el concepto de que sí, soy un juego. no estoy intentando hacer nada que no sea un juego. Está perfecto. No hay más explicación que dar. Recién acabo de notar esto que tengo acá abajo, que es una persona desde bebé haciéndose adulto, haciéndose anciano y muriendo. Me gusta ese acompañamiento temático. Bien, vamos a ver qué es este nodo, que es la primera vez que lo vemos. Este tipo de nodo. Ah, ok, más arte. Vale. Ay, lo puedo mover, qué preciosura.
This is a piece of art that I actually used to prototype a lot of different palettes. I would
Ok.
adjust the hue of the
Vamos a seguir por este nodo.
This puzzle is a very clear example of partial solvability, which is nice because it gives players the hint that they're on the right track. It is not too hard to get a monster past the first 2 claws just by walking right to left down here on the bottom. But it's not possible to get the monster past the 3rd plant just by walking left because you're blocked by this huge block here. If you try to climb the ladder to go over the block, it takes too long and the monster dies on the 3rd claw. But this blockage is not too discouraging since the player has seen that it's possible and intended to get a monster past the first 2 claws, so he can try to think of how to change it up a little bit for the last one. In this case, using rewind to get up over the block more directly. There's an extra flourish for the last step in the solution. The player is likely to try rewinding up here to the block first, but the block is not wide enough to walk on it to the correct spot. So either the player has to jump across the ladder to the left of the block, which is a little bit funny, or else he can realize that where he really wants to be ultimately is on the platform above the block. So he can go there first, then jump down, then rewind back up to it. By the time the player gets to this point, he knows he's hot on the trail to fully solving the puzzle, so he's probably in a good mood. This extra step provides a little extra surprise at the end that the player was unlikely to foresee, and that adds a little bit more enjoyment, at least, hopefully.
Así que está de mejor humor. Bien. Entonces, nos quedamos acá como para tener después para rebobinar. Y ahora queremos resolver esto lo más cercano a la primera posible. Ay, no me salió. Vamos de vuelta. Ahí está. Qué preciosura. Plup. Y a ver, hablaron algo acerca de poder acceder a la parte super secreta de arriba. Pero me parece que para eso voy a tener que traer de vuelta otro monstruito para acá. Vamos a ver si recibimos una estrella. Entonces hago tiempo acá, hago tiempo acá, hago tiempo acá, bajo. Qué pelotudo. Desperdicié mi oportunidad. Vamos de vuelta. Ah, casi. Último intento. ¡Ah! ¿Qué gané? ¿No hay una estrella para mí acá arriba? ¿Qué tal si hago lo mismo? Para. No. Voy a tener que hacer todo lo mismo. Entonces vamos a quedarnos un rato acá arriba. Rayos. Ni siquiera sé si voy a ganar una estrella yendo para allá, pero hay que intentarlo. Sí, señor. Jodeme que tengo que hacer todo una vez más. Ay, voy a tener que hacer todo el caminito de vuelta. Bien. Estoy acá un rato largo. Un momento. Ah, no, puedo hacer eso. Ok. Ok, ok. Mi primera estrella. ¡Qué orgullo! Nunca jugué el juego buscando las estrellas. Como ya lo he mencionado antes en este canal, no soy un completionist. Pero eso me llenó de orgullo. Y con eso vamos a terminar este episodio. Espero que estés aprendiendo, espero que lo estés disfrutando. De ser así, déjame un like, un comentario, un follow, esas cositas para levantarme el canal y que YouTube me acerque a nuevas audiencias, nuevas personas que puedan estar interesadas en todo esto. Qué gran juego, qué gran diseñador, no me canso de decirlo, etcétera, etcétera. Mi nombre es Nachito y nos vemos en el próximo episodio.